Hi, my name is Sheli Masondo. I'm a multi-award winning costume designer, and welcome to my masterclass. I've been in the film industry for almost 20 years now, and I've loved every moment of it. It started off as I started off as a fashion designer, straight out of college, straight out of high school. And by accident, I was found by a production designer who introduced me to the film industry. And the beginning was being thrown into at the deep end where I had to do a commercial. And as a stylist, as a designer, I did not get the opportunity to start off as a standby like normal people do. Which was very hectic for me, but also a great learning opportunity. Production designer that called me in to start off in the film industry, his name is Dylan Lloyd, and fortunately we actually won the award together, as she was also a production designer for Shaka iLembe. We did not always work together. In the last 20 years, we always went our separate ways and found ourselves together again, and on and on. So what I can tell you about costume design on my part is that I've mostly loved the fact that it's not all about making people look beautiful. It's about telling story. And I have loved telling story through costume the entire 20 years I've been here. And I've loved the fact that gritty is beauty, culture is beauty, color tells story, texture tells story. There's levels and layers of elements that actually create, that build up to telling a story. I'm gonna take you through the different steps of where it all begins. We are all freelancers in the film industry, and it all starts with that phone call that you're always waiting for. And when that phone call comes from a production house that's about to start, it's always exciting. And from the phone call, you check, your availability is checked, you're discussing budgets and rates. And from then on, you have a series of documents that come on your mail. And the first one that you actually go through is the story synopsis. For me, this is where I actually get to understand the characters of in the story, their story arc. The character bio of each character, breaking it down. But firstly is you just introduced to this world of story. Then you get briefed. And sitting around the table on the day that you briefed, you have the director who is actually chairing the meeting. You have the producers, you have the line producers who's actually chipping in for budget's sake. And I would say getting that process for me is my favorite process, because that's when the relationship between you and the director begins. And the director, and when they take you through, I think the first time I actually fell in love with directors and the industry itself was the first director that ever pitched a treatment to me, and their energy. So their energy actually feeds into what type of energy you're gonna have going forward with the project that you're about to embark on. So once you walk away from the briefing, and that's where you actually on your own on your desk you start breaking down the characters, going through the character bio, looking at the overview of each character, and that's where you get the physical description of the character breakdown, the personality, their personality, current and past relationships, their backstory, motivation and goals. But in reality, what you normally receive in this document, in our productions, is quite is a small paragraph. And this is an opportunity for you to actually explore more, of the character, where you'll be making suggestions on where you're seeing the character. So you create the extension of the bio, for the benefit of directing shaping the character and designing costume for this character. And then the next would be when you receive the script and you have to read the script, and you read the script multiple times. You'll go over the script. Firstly, you'd go over the script just to get the feel of the story. And then you would have to break the story down scene by scene. And at first you'd be doing it to consider design of costume. And the other number of times of reading the script would be to consider budget, to outline the story arc of character and the progression of costume. Other stories are action-packed, where there'll be gunshot wounds, there'll be a character that is probably rolling in the mud or falls into water, or wine is spilled on their shirts. And this is the stage where you actually working out how many items of that costume that they're wearing, how many you would have to account for, like how to consider, how many you would have to consider for this scene. I guess after reading the script, and now you've done reading and you've done breaking it down, and you move to the next step, which is research. Research is my favorite part of costume design. I love research. You could search on the internet. You spend long hours of internet search, and sometimes not everything, depending on story, not everything that you searching for you find on the internet. And that's where you would have to do like physical or contact research. On this, I would like to use the example of Snowfall, when I did Snowfall, which is a series based in LA. And the series is set in the 80s. And when I received that call to actually do costume for a series that had been running for 5 seasons, and I was called in to be part of the 6th season, and it's tougher to actually jump in on a project that's already been established, and I only had a few scenes to do of an episode, but they were crucial because that was a turning point of a character's journey in the story. I had to travel to Ghana because the couple in the story were were on a vacation in Ghana. So I had to go much earlier in production to actually go do research in a foreign country of a culture I did not know much about, except for the fact that I was African and the culture is also African. But there is so many layers that I had no clue what was about. And when I landed in Ghana, the first thing that I did was I wanted to go to the places that were in the script, visit the locations that the characters were going to visit. So this story was, I think what's special for me is that I only had one episode in the series and about 6 scenes, or not more than 10 scenes, 6 or 8 scenes, not more than 10 scenes only to shoot. But they were so layered with story and culture. I was given 2.5 months of research and prep. And this man actually was the one that actually was able to, from a stranger that was able to direct me to which museum to go to, not just any museum, after briefing him. And in the story, in the script itself, there was a dress which was called a batakari. It was mentioned in the script, so I had to find out what that is. And it was a war dress that was based in the 18th century, but it's been modernized now, and Ghanaians still wear them. So I had to learn about their cloth, the cloth that is used, the fabrics, the cottons, how they weave their cottons, how these small strips of woven kente are put together by hand. And in the slide here, I actually have images of the guy that was weaving and helping me with telling the story. I went through markets. So this story was based in the 80s, was set in the story in the 80s. So I had to go to the markets and see the difference between what would be different between how much fashion had progressed between the 80s and 2023. And then that takes you straight to designing for characters. So this is where I normally pull, depending on the production that I am working on. This is where I would pull in collaborators like my crew members, which is the production designer, the director of photography, hair and makeup, sound mixer or sound designer. Like now we've mentioned sound. One of the most beautiful moments of creating and collaborating with sound department for me was on Shaka iLembe, where we worked closely together because our cast almost had very little on, like where do we put the mic? Where do we put the cable? Where do we stick? I had to create. We had warrior beads, which were historically correct. We had warrior beads made of wood, and those warrior beads I had to give to the sound guy, who actually had to drill in holes. You won't see them because they feel like the thread of the bead. And we also had to create pouches that actually can, with leather, that can actually be a pass for a mic, and become part of the costume. So the collaboration with sound was pretty special for me on Shaka iLembe. Collaborating with cultural custodians and crafters. I'll make an example of Shaka iLembe as well. We we had a lot of cultural advisors, and it's always amazing. Like when you design, you go overboard, but you need someone to pull you back and actually say, no, the culture is this way, so you are correct, but this and that is not quite. So you like, there's appropriation, and and you respect that. So I've got a slide here in front of me, and where how we are actually used, and where I actually researched and traveled and started collaborating with, for instance, Shaka. I mean, the first people that I started showing my sketches to was Babu Mdletshe, who is the Zulu royal family advisor and a praise singer, who knows the culture, and and I think my first sketches, because I was very creative and I was going overboard with excitement, I think one of the things that he pulled me back on was creating isdwaba that were too long. And he was able to say to me, you know what, when a married woman's beauty is her legs, so you cannot cover them. You can't have a skirt that hits the floor, you can't have isdwaba that hits the floor. And that's where I had to pull back. So if you see my sketches, you would see that on the first sketch is those were the long skirts, and then I had to trim them. I have to pull back and actually make them shorter. Then move on to actually creating a deck, which is a look and feel board. So with all of the research that you've done, and you've taken pictures, you've scanned pictures, and you're putting them into look and feel. It's I do sketches. I still do hand-drawn sketches. I studied fashion design, so I do a lot of and I did it before AI. So I do hand-drawn sketching boards. So hand-drawn sketches. So some projects I do digital AI for modern. If I can't find a particular image that I have in my head, I try to get that through AI. But I still like the hand drawing, and depending on the project. For me, Shaka iLembe felt like a project that you needed to everything had to be like sort of like organic. So creating costume had to be organic, like still everything still needed to be hand stitched, like try to actually relive the way our ancestors did things. So even with the sketching, I still go back to that. So in your presentation, you would have fabric swatches. If you need to have things made up, you would need like visual references that you've pulled from the net. And then you are ready to present to director, producers, and client. And it's a sort of like a nerve-wracking process, but it's also a beautiful moment, because then you are not just presenting, you also taking in other ideas because you're not the only one presenting. I did 1802 as well, which was also a series that was a time travel piece, like between 18th century and millennial period. So I did also research on Amampondo, Abatembu, Amaxhosa, and did sketches. And because it was not really it was not told from, it was a fantasy as well. So when we did that, so there was an opportunity to actually take creative license in some pieces of costume design. The next step would be to actually meet the cast. Once the cast is you have approval and they've signed contracts, then it's an opportunity for you to meet them, take their measurements, and mostly it's actually to build trust with them. So what you do is what I do is I sit them down at the day of the taking measurements. I sit them down and I take them through my deck, I'll take them through, each character will just see their own deck. If it's necessary to see the people they are playing with or playing against, then I do show them those. And this process helps a lot in actually for them also understanding how I'm approaching their characters. It also helps me hear if they've done their own research on the character to actually take in what they're bringing on the table for the character. And this helps with building trust and respect for each other going forward. Yeah, we've built the trust with actors, and now we move on to sourcing and manufacturing of costumes. We've established that we've collaborating with fashion designers. Now we've given them the go ahead on designing, and we either design from scratch from fashion designers, or we actually take what exists. What I normally do with my productions is that I prefer stuff being done from scratch most of the times. And then that's when we also involve CMT workers. We use generationally skilled crafters. I don't know if there is a word like that. But what I do is like on Shaka iLembe, what I really embraced on Shaka iLembe is the fact that we took skill, I worked with skilled workers that had actually inherited the skill from past generations in their families. We also source from retail stores depending on the production. I thrift as well. And after you've sourced all of this, you still have to present it again to producers, production designers, and see if they still work with the plan, you've actually been able to achieve what you presented on a deck. And in other cases, directors change their minds, producers change their minds, or also depending on the actors. Once you get an actor and you had presented a look, and we all have different kind of body shape. Sometimes you present a look and it doesn't work for a different type of body shape or skin tone, or or the space they're going to be moving in, like the sets. There might be changes. So this happens a lot during approvals and fittings. And then we have test shoots, which is where we actually testing all of this costume. Does it work with the hair? Does it work with makeup? Does it work with the sets and lighting department? And you have a relationship also. This is where your relationship with the AD department starts, especially with the background cast. Background cast normally is briefed on what to bring on set. So does it work? Because sometimes it's an element of surprise on the day, even though you've briefed them. And what I normally do in this case, I also, so that we don't have that element of surprise, because at the end of the day, your background is just as important as your cast, because it also still is part of the world that you're creating. But what you would do, you'd also have to create a deck, especially for background, and then that you hand over to background coordinator, who sends it to their agency, so that they can see what the look and feel is for either the series or the particular scene they're gonna be in. And it's a relationship that you build also with your background cast coordinator and the agency, and they're able to actually say, no, our background actually has these type of looks, and then they send pictures, and you're able to select which costume they bring. And then we have the principal shoot, which is the main shoot, and then where we actually there to maintain the vision throughout. And then I work with costume team that is either big or small, depending on the production. When I worked on Shaka, we had like 28 crew members. I had 28 crew members. I had 3 times costume designers. I had crafters. I had beaders. I had background dressers, standbys, a number of standbys. I had like about 4 standbys. We had lead actor dressers and standbys. We had costume buyer. We had costume designer assistant, costume assistant. We had a big team because each and every section of of a shooting day had to be divided so that there is a supervisor that is in charge of the background, a supervisor in charge of the crafting team, a supervisor in charge of the leads and supports. My mantra is, I love that I see beauty and story potential in everyone, no matter how society deems them fashionable or not fashionable. This is my masterclass. Goodbye.